Hello everybody, my name is Rishabh and in today's video we will be discussing my overall exam experience when I went to write my CA final SPOM SET-A law, and I cleared this examination in the very first attempt with good marks. In this video, I will be sharing you what was the difficulty level in the examination, what are the major chapters that were asked in the examination. And apart from this, I will be also sharing you what are the important chapters that you should be focusing on, what are the important topics, what are the important sections that are majorly asked in most of the students examinations. Means these chapters, these sections are basically ones which are asked in every question paper. And the third thing is what are the tips and strategy to clear CA final SPOM in just first attempt. So do watch the video till end and do let me know in the comment section if you have any other concern. Now without wasting much of time, let us begin. Now, there were totally 50 questions that were asked in the examination and each carries 2 marks. So totally 100 marks paper was there. Out of 50 questions, I would say most of the questions, like 40 to 42 questions, were direct questions. That means these questions were directly taken from the section and was given as it is into the question paper. Hardly 8 to 10 questions were there that were kind of indirect, more of analytical skills to answer those questions. So majorly the paper was kind of, I will not say it was a very difficult paper or it was a very easy also, but I would say this paper was kind of medium-ish. I mean, somebody who has done a decent preparation can easily clear this examination in the very first attempt. Now, we will be discussing what are the major chapters that were asked in the examination. Before I move on to the next slide, let me tell you these chapters, the marks allocation in the next slide, this slide. Basically, these are the chapters which I have identified. So once I had went to the examination, I had come from there. I wrote on 8th of June. So 9th of June I sat. I went through each and every section. I identified what were the questions that were asked in the examination, and majorly most of the questions I was able to find in the sections, my material which I referred. Now in this particular sheet you can see there is SEBI, there is IBC, directors, FEMA and CAA. These were the 5 chapters that were majorly asked. SEBI ICAI weightage is also given of 20 marks, and this was exactly asked 10 questions and that constitute 20 marks. IBC, there was a major chapter from which 18 marks of questions were asked, 9 questions of 2 marks each. Directors, again 8 questions of 2 marks each, that constitutes 16 marks. And again the FEMA, the 4th largest chapter, that was asked for 14 marks, 7 marks of 2 questions each. So these were the major 4 chapters that were asked. If I would have done these chapters only, I was easily able to score more than 60 marks. So this is basically the table you can see on both the sides. These were the chapters, these were the major chapters, these were the questions that were asked from these chapters. And there might be hardly 5 to 6% of here and there. I mean 1 or 2 questions maybe from one chapter to another chapter, but most of 95% I can say that these were the chapters from which the examination question paper was framed in my case. In the next slide, you can see these are the 7 chapters that constituted 86 marks of questions in my exam paper. So you can also see that the ICAI weightage what is given, that is kind of 5 or 10% here is there, but most of the ICAI weightage what is given in the set A SPOM ka jo appendix hota hai uske andar, so that is kind of matching. So 5 or 10% here and there would be there, but ICAI is strict to their chapter wise weightage. Now this may be different in other students case, but what I observed was there were totally 7 students that were sitting in my examination center, out of which I spoke to 5 of them, and we identified that most of the questions that were asked were from these chapters only. I mean the SEBI, IBC, FEMA, directors, CAA, FCRA. These were the major chapters from which the questions were asked. And let me tell you one more thing, there was questions which was repeated, like the question that came for me, that came for some other students also. So there is not necessary that question paper will be different for different candidates, but there are repeated questions that are being asked in different question papers. Now moving on to the next slide. In this particular slide, we will be discussing what are the major topics that were asked in the examination. So let me tell you, these were in the previous slide we discussed what were the major chapters. In this slide, we will be discussing what were the major topics or the sections that were asked. So from the directors chapters, I would say small shareholder director, that is one of the topic of directors chapter. From SSD, there were totally 6 marks of questions were asked from SSD. There was 2 questions of woman director that were asked from directors chapter. If I come on to the managerial remuneration, there was calculation of effective capital was there, and from that I had to also calculate what is the maximum remuneration that can be paid to the non-executive director. So this was the question that was asked for managerial remuneration. Now the third chapter is SEBI. In the SEBI, I observed that there were totally 4 questions that came from SEBI IPO listing requirements. The requirements are basically there should be minimum of 3 crore of net tangible assets, after which not more than 50% should be monetary assets. So those kind of monetary limits, whatever was there in IPO in the SEBI IPO requirement chapter, IPO listing requirement chapter, these questions were asked from this particular chapter. Apart from that, there was question from LODR also, SEBI Act also, like what is the constitution of members, when members can be removed, who has the authority to remove the members. These kind of questions were asked. In FEMA, there was question from ECB, external commercial borrowings. There were question from ODI, overseas direct investment, residential status, CUAT, current account transaction, capital account transaction. So these were the chapters from which, these were the topics from which the FEMA question paper was framed. Now the IBC, the one of the very big chapter, the entire chapter, like in IBC, I observed that there were different MCQs were framed from different sections. This is not necessary that particular section is given from which the entire MCQ was framed. No, there were case studies were there, and from which in those case studies there were questions that were from the entire chapter, except your pre-packaged insolvency resolution or the fast track. These two you can remove, these were not there. Apart from there, most of the chapter they were trying to cover up in this particular in IBC chapter. One more thing, this entire PDF you can get in the Telegram channel. The link of the channel is given into the description. Please do join that channel, and I will be sharing this PDF in that Telegram channel only. Now, from another chapter, that is FCRA, there were questions were from trust registration related provisions. What is the tenure of the registration? If the registration is ceased, what is the cooling period up to which the registration will not be granted by the central government? So these kind of provisions were asked from FCRA. There was question from CAA, that is compromise, arrangement and amalgamation, from which there what is the approval mechanism, by what date you will be getting the approval. So time limits related provisions were asked. In what case the appeal can be made to the tribunal. So these kind of questions were asked from this particular chapter. So these were the major important topics from which the questions were framed. Now moving on to the next slide, what are the tips to clear your set A? What you should be focusing on? You should be focusing firstly on the time limits. On the limits, basically the woman director limit is there, 100 crore, 300 crore turnover, that those criteria, independent director ka criteria, small shareholder director, who is a small shareholder director. So all these kind of limit related provisions you should thoroughly understand and thoroughly remember. Now the second thing that you should be doing is time limits. Wherever there is a time limit, let's say in particular in board meetings chapter, there are time limits with respect to when the meeting should be conducted, how much is the duration between the meetings. So these kind of time limits related provisions, such as in case of IBC chapters, 2 questions were asked from this particular topic. This was a COC meeting. So when the COC meeting should be conducted and what is the time limit for the COC meeting. So these questions were asked in board meeting chapter. So these kind of chapters that you should be, these kind of topics you should be definitely doing. Penalties you may or you may not do. In my case, there were totally 2 questions that were asked from penalties. Entire, if you consider the law syllabus, only 2 questions were asked from penalties, and that too one was from SEBI and one was from FCRA. Now the fourth thing that you should be doing is at least 2 reading of every section. Most of the chapters, the major chapters, you should give at least 2 readings of the chapter. That will increase your retention power, and you will be able to clearly identify the question from which it is there in the total syllabus. Now the big chapters you should definitely not skip. The big SEBI directors, IBC, FEMA, these are the very big 4 big chapters that I discussed with other students also, who also told that these are the 4 big chapters that everyone should definitely do it, because you will easily find 40 to 45 marks of questions from these 4 chapters only. So this can aram se help you to clear your SPOM set in the very first attempt. Now the miscellaneous chapters, like many of us skip. I also skipped, but on the last day, on the morning only, I was able to go through dormant company, Nidhi company. And if I tell you, from dormant company there were a total of 6 marks of questions were asked, and from Nidhi company 4 marks of questions were asked. Totally 10 marks of questions were asked from these 2 chapters only. So you can imagine like what is the weightage that can be given to these kind of chapters. Specific exceptions wherever is given in the particular chapter, that you definitely should do, because these are the major pinpoints for the ICAI to identify the questions, identify the MCQs to be given in the examination question paper. That's all about it. Thanks a lot for watching. If you have any other concerns, do let me know in the comment section, and I will try to respond to you as soon as possible. Plus also share it with your friends who is having worry about how their examination will be. Let me tell you guys, if you give at least 2 revisions of every chapter, it will be more than enough for you to clear SPOM SET-A. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much for watching.